We have figured out the problem. Okay, thanks. I'm gonna run.
Success. Okay, you guys have a great
That
time.
Michael this is Haley on the phone. He said you did great.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. You guys have fun.
Okay.
You're great, Haley. You're great.
He said you're great. You're great. Okay, see you later. Bye.
You.
I know what happened now because Haley tried to make my life easier by sending me an update, and it actually created problems.
All good.
Okay, you ready to have some fun?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, here we go.
I got my book right here, too.
You promote that book as much as you want and how people can... The shenanigans that happens before podcasts, right? Where are you right now? Are you in like a sharing space, a co-working space?
Yeah, actually, I moved into a co-living space.
A co-living? What does a co-living space mean?
So you have your own bedroom, your own bathroom, your own closet, and then you share a like kitchen area. Look, I'll show you. So
like for real? Like I thought you were joking.
Would I joke about something like this?
Well, probably not, but who's the person you're living with? Do you know them?
There's 20 people.
Stop it.
Yeah, there's
20
3 units.
people?
Yeah, there's not everybody's moved in. There's only 7 people are here right now.
How do you know you're safe?
It's brand new construction. How do I know I'm safe?
Yes.
I lived in New York City. I went door to door in Baltimore, some of the worst areas in the country.
Uh-huh.
It's not really a concern of mine.
It's not? You don't worry?
In Venice, California, it's the last thing I worry about.
Okay.
No,
so
you have your own door. I mean, you have your own room. Like I have a big room. Like the biggest closets I've ever had and the biggest bathroom I've ever had of any house I lived in, owned or anything. And I actually want to open one of these.
Really?
Next year. So this is kind of a quasi experiment for me that I'm living here, learning everything about it. And then I'm going to go look to open one. Yeah. And I might tie my addiction work into it.
Part of the entrepreneurial dream.
Exactly. Yeah. So I am in a co-living space.
Ooh.
Kitchen area, and there's a desk here and everything, or a table. And that's where I'm at. Because I didn't get my desk for my room yet. It's still on order.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that. Is it okay if I do? I'm sharing. I'm going to take that little tidbit and share it with what I call my inner circle. Okay. Is that cool?
That's totally cool.
I knew you would love that. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you're joining us from Venice, California.
I am.
Okay. You ready? Here we go.
I'm ready.
Today on the Inner Circle, we are going to chase the high, literally. My guest wrote a book on the topic and called it exactly that, Chasing the High. So what does that mean when you apply it to life and work and living? For Michael Dash, that meant riding the highs of entrepreneurship, the highs of cocaine, the highs of gambling, of Adderall, of alcohol, and even, we'll see if he agrees with us later on, the highs of philanthropy. It's an emotional roller coaster that he wants to dig into, and that is what we're going to do with that conversation today. How did he get off it, get back on solid ground, and create a very successful business and write a book about it? He's going to tell us that and more. He joins us via the interweb. From Venice, California. Michael, how are you today?
I am fabulous. What an amazing introduction. You've done this once or twice, haven't you?
Maybe once or twice. I like beginning here. I have to, just because you're in Venice, California. What's the weather like there today? Because we're in, I'm in Edmonton and it's like -3 or 4 Celsius.
It's a balmy 75 degrees out here
That sounds
in Venice, California.
So dreamy, so dreamy. Okay.
It's amazing. It is definitely amazing. I lived in Salt Lake City for the last 11 years, so it was very no humidity there. So it would be very, very cold or very, very hot. So I understand the cold.
But how do you like living where you are right now?
Oh, people say to me, Michael, you don't miss the seasons? And my answer is absolutely not.
Really?
No, I don't miss him. I don't miss him at all. The sun every day is great with me.
Uh-uh.
I grew up in New Jersey and I lived in New York City for years and then Salt Lake City. So I had all four seasons for, the majority of my life. So I'm good with this.
And that's where I hear when you say Jersey, I love your accent. It's so like you could just read me the dictionary and I'd be really good with that.
That'll take me a long time. There's a lot of
Okay, Michael, I just want to start right here. For all of our Canadian listeners who may not be familiar with who you are and what you do, what are you doing today in your life for business? Define what business looks like for you right now in your life.
So right now I am developing a program to work with entrepreneurs and business leaders who are dealing with addictive and compulsive behaviors to help them step back into the leader, spouse, and friend that they were truly born to be. That's on my platform called FATE, F-A-T-E, which stands for From Addict to Entrepreneur.
That's awfully vulnerable.
It's the only way I know how to be.
We're going to dig into that, but before we go forward, let's go backwards and talk about your upbringing. Tell me about it. What was it like?
I was very fortunate. I grew up in a middle-class family, the son of an entrepreneur. I wanted to emulate my father, so I followed him around everywhere and worked for him at an early age. He had a import-export business and a retail store all around fine china, Lalique, Baccarat, Waterford, Swarovski, everything of that nature.
Wow.
And so I worked for him growing up. 8 years old, I was in the warehouse learning how to work. He was a believer of you're the first one in and you're the last one out and you outwork the competition, and that's how you become successful in life.
So with that type of upbringing and being exposed to that every day, what kind of a belief system did it create for you?
Well, it created this, so I was always chasing money. Like I wanted money. I wanted to close a sale.
Like even at a young age, that was implanted in your mind? Like where's your earliest recollection of that? How old do you think you were?
Well, at 11 years old, I was introduced to gambling by my uncle. So
really?
Yeah.
What was that like? You can't just throw that out there and then not talk about that. Bless you.
I even react to it now. So I was at Thanksgiving and my uncle was like glued to the TV while the rest of the family was in the other side of the house. I was always like curious, like what is he doing? Why is he so interested in this football game? And he told me he had bet on the game and he took this sheet out which had all the games and the point spreads. And he showed me the games that he bet on and he had circled them. And he told me if I got $10 and was able to get 4 games right, that I would win $100. Oh, and I was like, oh my God, my eyes just lit up. And I went and borrowed $10 from my parents.
You didn't? Like at that moment, that's how big it impacted you?
Yeah. I told them, I think it was that night or that moment. I stayed with my uncle that night though. And I told my parents I needed it to get hoagies, like which are big sandwiches, and that's what they call them in Massachusetts.
Yes.
And it's not a universal word, so I just want to clarify.
No, but we're familiar with the hoagies anyway. Okay. I know where you're going. Okay.
Okay.
So you told them that you needed the hoagie money, and
so they gave me $10 for
Okay.
it. And then so I bet on 4 games, and the worst thing that possibly could have happened to me did, and I won 4 games at like 11 years old. I won $100. So that rush was like, took me right away, and I was hooked then. And working for my father with all the warehouse guys, they all gambled. So they would take my bets when I'm 10, 11, 12. I would work for my dad. He would pay me whatever, and then I would go bet it with the warehouse guys. And then my little league coach, he was a bookie, because that's how we do it in Jersey. If you've seen The Sopranos, then you know. So I was hooked early on, and then I was also hooked working for my father. Once I moved into the retail store and I started serving customers, I started helping customers like buying crystal and stuff, like just being able to make that sale. I just got this rush. It was a similar rush as I got to making a bet. So
That's
fascination was money was off and running.
But that's what I wanted to ask you about, how you would define hooked, because you use that word several times. You were hooked, you were hooked. It was the rush, it was the high?
Yeah, 100%. It was that rush of adrenaline that I got from, making a sale, and also from making a bet. It wasn't actually watching the games or anything. It was actually making that bet. And all that went into it, all the research I would do and everything I would study, and then calling up the bookie years later, making the bet would just give me this rush.
Okay, so what about the losses? It didn't diminish that rush? Because there must have been losses along the way.
No, I mean, most of the time I lost. I was a perennial loser. But I just love the action, right? That's what we call it, the action.
Okay.
The action of making a bet. And I liked to push the limits. I like the adrenaline rush. I was an adrenaline junkie. That's how I filled it back then.
So it started with gambling. Where did it grow into and progress into?
When I went in high school, I was a pretty straight-laced kid. I was president of student council, did the 3 sports, ran track, all that stuff. I didn't really do any drugs. When I went to college, though, I started really experimenting with everything and anything. My roommate at the time was shot with a .357 Magnum, actually, by his ex-girlfriend.
What?
And it was crazy. It blew out his tricep, the back of his arm. This happened over break. So when I returned from break, he was, I walked into our dorm room and it was filled with pills and drugs and everything. And he was like, hey, you should try this. This will make you feel amazing. And then you should try this one and it'll take the edge off of it. It'll make you feel even better. And so I was popping pills. I was trying everything. And then I think he introduced me, or we started trying cocaine. And cocaine was really bad for me because I mixed it with gambling. Eventually gambling, I wasn't high enough. I needed to be high. I needed that extra adrenaline rush. And then I would get it from cocaine. So I would do both gambling and cocaine together.
Which, oh my gosh, when did this finally come to a head? Because that is as dangerous combination as it gets.
Yeah, and I would also, smoke marijuana to come down from that. So, and pop pills and all this stuff. It was just a crazy time. When I was in college, I figured, why make bets when I can take bets? So, my entrepreneurial, aspirations that I had inside of me, because I followed my dad around, kicked in and I became a bookie. And I did the same thing with drugs. And, I was like, look, all this stuff is costing me a lot of money. I need to fund it. How am I going to fund it? All right, I'll be a bookie and I'll be a drug dealer. And that's what I did. I was a bookie and a drug dealer in college. And I was also working, going door to door, selling home improvements. So I had all this stuff going on, and I was going to school sometimes. So I had all this stuff going on, and it was all chasing that dollar and chasing the rush. Every single one of those things provided that for me.
Did you finish college?
Oh yeah, I finished in 4 years. I got a 2.8, but I was checked out. I mean, I would pop, I was interested in entrepreneurship class and certain courses I was interested in, but the rest of it was, I was a big believer in the school of hard knocks, that you learn most everything that I've learned is from actually doing, right? From going door to door, I learned so much about sales, about people, about connection, about leverage, about communication, all from going door to door. Because I was actually, it was a reverse role. I was a minority when I was going door to door, because I was in Baltimore, I was in DC, I was in low income areas, and, it was mostly minorities. So, I was called the white devil walking down the street trying to sell windows, siding, roofing, decks. And so it acclimated me to any situation. And I felt like once I was successful doing that, I could really do anything. But back to your original question about when did it hit it?
Yeah.
It really, there was never one moment. It was like an accumulation accumulation of events that allowed me to start tapping into my curiosity that eventually led me to go get help.
Okay, what's the accumulation of things that tapped into your curiosity? That's a big, big statement here, because I'm assuming that you kind of abandoned your curiosity through those times. Did you shelve that?
Well, I had curiosity. It was just negative curiosity. I was curious about this drug and that drug, and
yes,
nothing positive. But just in general, as I graduated college, as I started working in New York City, I was still gambling. I was around it all the time. All my friends gambled. I was still around drugs everywhere in New York City. I was taking my clients out. They wanted to party. So it was all over the place. But the gambling was out of control for me more than anything, because I could gamble any day at any time. Eventually, you run out of drugs. You got to get in touch with somebody to get drugs. You run out of whatever else you're doing. You have to go gambling. Though I could pop. Mm-hmm. I could pop my computer open and I could gamble at any time, any day.
Yes.
So, I was isolating myself. I wasn't really happy. I was actually completely miserable. And it was a trip back up to Thanksgiving. These things revolve around Thanksgiving, ironically, where I was with my brother in the car and he wouldn't let me turn on sports radio. And I got into an argument with him, and he told me he was going to Gamblers Anonymous, that he can't listen to sports radio anymore. So I called him a loser. I called him a couple names, and I'm like, what's wrong with you? Anyway, we settled on listening to music, 3.5-hour car ride. It was the most peaceful ride I had ever been on. I felt really relaxed. My mind wasn't racing. Mm-hmm. And after it, I thought to myself, I'm going to go check this GA out, this Gamblers Anonymous out, because I want to know what they did to my brother. I wanted my brother back. So he didn't push me to go. He didn't tell me I should go, nothing like that, because I would have resisted it. And most addicts will resist if you're trying to push something on them. But it was my curiosity that really I tapped into. And I went to a meeting the next week, and I realized after 2 hours, after walking in there and judging everybody, 2 hours later, after everybody talked and shared, I realized I had more in common with everybody in that room than I did my closest friends. And I went back next week, and I kept working the program, and I haven't gambled since. And I've been 14 years clean.
14 years. And that was the first step, was
From
taking
gambling,
that.
Yes.
Okay. So that started with gambling, but what about the drugs that you were doing? And while we're having this conversation, I just want to point out to our listeners that you do live, you said, in a co-living space. Is that what it's called?
It is.
Okay, so there's other people that are around you. Yeah, they're in the kitchen while we're taping this podcast. So for those of you listening and you hear activity in the background, just so you know, like I said, Michael lives in a co-living space. There's people around him, and we're going for it. So that's the noise in the background. Yeah. Okay. What are they making? A sandwich or something?
No, I think they were just washing dishes being...
okay, but just to be clear, you guys all share the kitchen, right?
We do.
Which is wild. Anyway, I
digress. There's three kitchens.
Oh, there's 3 kitchens then. Okay. Yeah.
And 5 people share each kitchen.
Okay. Well, I digress, but I had to ask you because I heard the noise. Okay, let's go back. You go to Gamblers Anonymous. You're getting help. But in the interim, are you still using drugs?
Yes.
What? That doesn't make any sense.
To me, it did.
How?
Well, so the cocaine specifically was it was a weekend drug for me. So I wasn't doing it every night. So I in my mind, there wasn't a problem. Right? I was just doing it on the weekends. I'm not addicted. I was smoking pot every night. And again, though, I just classified that. In my mind, I classified everything. And I said, that's pot. It's not really a big deal. And then with the cocaine, it was just a weekend thing. Okay. But I actually hated cocaine.
Because?
It had the opposite effect on me. I'm a very outgoing person, and I wouldn't talk when I was doing it. And I would only think about doing it more and more and more. So eventually I ended up, the whole cocaine story is, I did it for 8 years straight, almost every weekend. I never let it interfere with my work. I was always very productive at work. I was a great salesperson.
Okay.
I mean, I could sell ice to an Eskimo, and you probably know how that feels right now with the weather out there. So, but I really did not let it affect that. So
Okay.
I needed to make money so I could keep buying this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
However, I was at a bar with a friend of mine at a club, and he got in an argument with somebody and went to break up the fight. And I actually got punched in the face, and it broke my nose. And so when I went in the doctor's office after they fixed my nose, they handed me a bill for $10,000. And the way my mind worked is that, you know, it was all about money. So I said to myself, I will never put anything up this $10,000 nose again. And I quit that day, and I never did it again.
Did you quit everything? What about
No.
the marijuana and the Adderall? Okay, so what was the tipping point for all the drugs when you let it go and you really dug into your business?
I didn't know at all until I left New York City and moved to Utah and started my business. And everybody in Utah was doing Adderall. They introduced me to Adderall. I didn't know what it was. So I didn't get hooked on Adderall till I was done with all that other stuff. And I used Adderall actually to fuel me in my business. Out of all the addictions that I had, it was by far the worst one, because I craved it all the time. And I did it in the, you know, I would go into work every day and pop an Adderall, and I would get a lot of work done. I would crush it. So to me, I was like, oh, this is great. This is fueling my production. It's fueling the company. It's fueling the growth. But it really affected my mood, and it affected, you know, just my emotional state in general. If I was feeling like it's a great day, I would actually feel like it was the best day on planet Earth. There could never be a better day. And if I was feeling terrible, then I would be like extremely depressed on the verge of like wanting to commit suicide. So it like, that's the fluctuation it had. And then that impacted the way I treated my employees. And, you know, I was really a jerk most of the time to my employees. I didn't lead from a place of empathy. I led from a place of like correction and, you know, kind of coming down on them and demean them without even knowing at the time I was doing it. I was just so driven by, you know, by the dollar and by paying bills and by paying all this other stuff.
How successful were you in your business at that time? What was business doing?
It was good. Business was good. We grew the company to about $5.5 million a year in 5 years. I had a partner at the time, so together we built it. And then I bought her out after we were about 5 years into it. Our ideas for the direction of the company were going in different ways. Spend more time with her kids, and I totally respected that. But I wanted to grow the business, and she wanted to work 6 hours, and I was working 12 hours, and she still wanted to 50-50 split. And I was like, that's just not happening. So I negotiated to buy her out. And then within 6 months, I felt like she violated our agreement, and I held off on one of the payments, telling her we're doing an investigation, and she sued me. And that actually started a 6-year lawsuit. 6 years.
6 years. What happened in the end? I have to ask.
Well, I settled it last year, and I settled it and sold the company within the same week.
Seriously? That's a lot going on.
It took 6 years to get to that point.
A successful end for you?
I just wanted out of the company, and I wanted done with the lawsuit. I mean, it cost me over $1 million, and the suit itself was over $350K, but it cost me over $1 million in lawyer fees because I wasn't mature enough at the time. My ego was driving all the decisions I was making. They were all emotional decisions. She was very emotionally involved as well. It's two to tango, but I take responsibility for my part of it. And, you know, if I knew now what I knew then, I would have just, you know, swallowed my ego and just paid the money. But there were some strong violations. She started competing company against me, took several of the employees. So it was one of those deals. And I was getting advice from the wrong person, who was actually my father. but that's who I was getting advice from. And, you know, if there's one piece of advice I could give anybody, well, I could
Yes.
give pieces of advice,
Mm-hmm.
but for your audience, if you're in your job, if you own a business, if you have decisions to make with the business, probably the worst people you could ask, or in any dispute, especially, is somebody related to you, because they want to protect you. So they're not thinking of the big picture. They're thinking of someone is attacking my son or my daughter or my niece, nephew, whatever it is. You know, don't you dare let them do that to you. And that's kind of was my dad's mentality. And I was feeding off of that. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. There's no way I'm letting her do this.
It's like pouring fuel on a fire.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. So, and then I through it all, really despised my lawyers, because they were taking me for a ride. And yeah, so I had this whole thing with the lawyers. But the entire time I was on Adderall. It was driving my emotional state. So here I bought the company for $1.35 million. I paid $1 million up front. And then months later, she's starting a competing company. So then I held off on one of the payments for the $350. She sued me. I'm trying to, I didn't have $1 million to buy the company. So I'm really working hard. I have 3 offices I'm managing. I'm coming down on the staff because I'm like, I got to pay these lawyer bills and I got to pay back the loan I took to buy this company. So, and I'm taking Adderall. And so my life was chaos.
Okay.
I ran my business in a chaotic state of mind, fueled by Adderall, you know, popping Adderall in the morning, smoking weed at night, isolating myself, you know, I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody, you know?
Okay, when and why did you decide to make a change? And what was that change?
So I decided to make a change about 3 years ago. I took a trip to Bali.
Bali.
All good things happen in Bali.
They do. I honeymooned in Bali. I can relate.
There you go. Look at that.
Yeah.
So I went on a retreat called Unconventional Life. I really didn't know what it was about, but I was referred to it. And I saw Bali and I said, I want to go. Like, I don't care what it's about. I'm going to Bali. I had actually just come off this big fundraising effort I did, which was very successful for Leukemia Lymphoma Society. But I was still miserable in the company and everything. And I went to Bali, and this Unconventional Life was 30 people looking to live life on their terms, not based on societal norms, not based on what conventional society tells us we need to do, but based on the way we want to live. And I heard 2 people talking about flow consciousness there. And they were talking about how you can live an effortless life by following your intuition and making decisions through your heart versus your head and your gut. Some people will refer to it as your gut versus your head. And that if it's not a hell yes, it should be an F no in everything that you do in life. I don't know if this is a PG show or not, so, you know.
No. Yeah, I like, we're talking in the rawest form, so go for it. So, continue on.
If it's not a hell yes, it's a fuck no. Okay.
Got it.
I wanted to just add a respect. So I thought it was complete bullshit what they were saying. And I challenged them because they were giving all these examples how they quit their corporate jobs and now they were learned about flow and now they were teaching it and they were everywhere and they were getting flown all over the world to teach flow and their life was magical and blah, blah, blah. And I was sitting there and they were talking about like you're able to manifest your future and there's synchronicity all around us. And I was just like, this is bullshit. I'm like, first of all, I never said the word manifest or synchronicity before that day. And I turned to the person next to me. I'm like, what they're calling synchronicity, we call coincidence back east. Okay. If you work hard, good shit will happen to you.
Right.
That's the reality of life. Forget all this other nonsense. And so I was just brought up in a way that anybody who talked about energy or astrology or flow or, you know, meditation, they were all crazy people. Put them over here and, you know, don't even bother with them because they're living on a different planet. It's not reality and all this. So I challenged them, and they pushed back, and we met afterwards and talked for about an hour. And they had this course they were offering for like $1,000. And in my mind, again, it was a scam.
Yes.
But when I flew back from Bali to Salt Lake City, I just kept saying over and over to myself the phrase, would it be so bad to live a different way?
Well, they got under your skin, didn't they?
To live a different way.
Ah.
I was actually miserable at the time. I was running a business that was running me. I had like a bunch of investments that were controlling my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not happy at all. I was just as miserable as you could possibly be. So the answer to that question was no, it actually would be amazing to live a different way. Like, this feels amazing. So I decided to take the leap and take their course. And it really changed my life. They took all of us through a process of clearing your limiting beliefs through tapping and EMDR. I don't know if you're familiar with either of these.
I just explain them briefly so that everybody understands.
So I could explain in layman's terms and like,
yes.
So basically they had us taking these two fingers and tapping right up on the back of our neck here. There's like a nerve coming down here, and moving our eyes right to left and repeating these sayings out loud and clearing limiting beliefs. So
that's what that's supposed to do, is that tapping clears the limiting beliefs?
The tapping and moving your eyes back and forth and reciting it out loud. So like, say for instance, change is difficult. That's a limiting belief a lot of people have. Like, a lot of people actually change is very difficult.
Yes.
It's really not, but people believe that. So you would say change is difficult, and you would repeat it while moving your eyes back and forth and tapping on the back of your neck. There's in this, like, between your spine and your shoulder blade.
Yeah, okay.
Again, I thought it was crazy, but I just didn't judge, and I just did it. And it was actually and it took a lot of energy out of me, and they warned it would, and which I thought was a joke also. I was exhausted after I was done doing it. So you go through like 10, 20, 30 of these, and then you put in positive beliefs. So for change is difficult, instead of that, then you put in change is easy. And you do the same thing, but you repeat change is easy.
Wow.
In positive beliefs. And so I did all that, and then they had us do a variety of other things over the 10 weeks. And I actually started seeing changes coming in my life. And like, I was actually starting to manifest solutions to the like millions of problems that I had created for myself. You know, they were all the problems in my life were self-inflicted wounds. Like, I don't want anyone to feel bad for me, because I did it to myself. Mm-hmm. And most of us do. But I was able to kind of go through this process and manifest solutions. So flow actually changed my life. And it changed my life so much that I wrote a chapter in here about it. And so eventually it took me a while to untangle. Mm-hmm. So I still had growth to do, but I was on the right track at that point. And it took me some more mistakes to get to a place where I was ready to settle the lawsuit. And at the time, I just wasn't happy with the company. I was making more impact and getting more fulfillment from my philanthropy and the fundraising stuff I was doing. Mm-hmm. That's when I knew in my mind I didn't want to do this anymore. Like, I had a staffing company. I would help find $100,000 software engineers, $120,000 jobs. And I just didn't think there was really a lot of value that I was giving to society in doing that. So that's why I decided to settle and sell. Okay. How did that feel to do that? 1 second. Water break. Sorry, needed the Poland Spring. It actually, you know, one of the things I've been working on is when I accomplish something that I celebrate it. It's like been very, and I know a lot of people, like a lot of entrepreneurs in my space, when they hit a milestone, it's just like, okay, what's the next milestone? You probably can relate to this. You know, you get a certain number of downloads on your podcast. We'll just take this as an example. And then you're like, okay, well, when is it I'm going to get to this next milestone.
Absolutely. Yeah, you
It's
get
like,
driven by that. And I guess that is where you always compare the high, right? The entrepreneurship is a high, is it not? From your perspective, explain that.
yeah, totally. I mean, like releasing the book wasn't really the high, but then when I started having events, that was a high. When I was
Yeah.
able to talk in front of people about the book, when I was signing books for people, I'm like, yeah, it was kind of cool. But it's also a high because people were learning from it.
Mhm.
Learn from my mistakes. You don't have to go through the same agony and destruction that I did in order to learn from it.
Mhm.
So the high is really giving back and seeing people transform or seeing people incorporate something that I went through into their life.
Mhm. So I know you hopped in with both feet there talking about the book. So what precipitated the book? Let's talk about it and what you wrote about it in that journey. What did you reveal?
The synchronicities of life led me to write the book. So I'm part of a bunch of entrepreneur communities. One of them is called YEC.
Yeah.
And they basically have an event every year in Utah. It's called Escape, YEC Escape. And they have some speakers there. It's actually how I found out about the Bali trip. And one of the speakers there was a gentleman with an organization called Book in a Box. And they help people tell their story and write their book. And the company is now called Scribe Media. But I started listening to him, and I never thought about writing a book before. I mean, I don't like writing. So I never even thought about it, but I know I have a story to tell, and I certainly like talking a lot. So I inquired after with him, like, what is this all about? What does it take to write the book? How much is it? All this stuff. And I just put it in the back pocket. And then as I was going through, just life the next year or two, I would tell stories about what was going on in my life. And person after person after person is like, man, you got to write a book. You got to write a book. And I'm like, okay, well, I felt like the universe, now I believed in flow, right?
Yes.
So I felt like the universe was calling on me to write this book. And I was called to do it. So I did.
How long did it take you?
It took me about a year and a half, but I took 6 months off between them. So really about a year if you cut that 6 months out.
So what did it feel like to write that book? Was it cathartic?
It was cathartic. It was emotional. It was exhausting. It felt never ending. And then it was like, oh my God, I just revealed a bunch of shit in here. I got to tell my parents before it comes out. So I give them a heads up. Right?
And how did they react?
Well, I told them, but they didn't really understand until they read it. And then my mom had, my dad's always is cool with things, but my mom's very emotional. And my mom, called my brother up. Like, I didn't know this till after the fact. She was crying to my brother. Did I not raise you guys properly? And, she went through that whole thing. So, I just called her and told her, look, this would have happened no matter how you raised us. It has nothing to do with you. Zero to do. So I think she was okay with it. And then she came to my book release event in New York where I talked about a lot of this stuff with my dad. And so I think they were fine with it. And ultimately they're just like most parents, not all, because not everybody has supportive parents, but like most parents who are supportive and they just want me to be happy, and they don't understand what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, but they, they want me to ultimately be happy. So they're like, we don't understand how you're going to make a living. And I'm like, well, the great thing is you don't need to. It's my life. And I'll educate you as much as I can, but they're not up to that. My dad's 87 and my mom's 74.
Okay.
So,
So I'm curious. I'm a public speaking coach, as you know, and one of the most common things that I hear from my clients is they don't understand why they need to use their voice to tell their story. Why did you embrace your story and feel so strongly about sharing it? Empower them. They're listening.
I believe that we are doing a disservice to similar people in our situations if we do not tell our story. We are doing a disservice to them. So if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for them. Because when I got a message, like I've gotten a ton of messages, but when I got a message on LinkedIn 3 weeks ago from a 22-year-old Marine who told me his life was spiraling out of control and he was looking for some self-improvement books, some self-help books. He went on Amazon. He didn't know why, but the cover of my book drew him to it. Mm-hmm. And he bought it and he read it and he stopped drinking. He was drinking like every night. And he started incorporating some of the things in my book into his life. There's a whole chapter on the habit of habit making and how important that is. Mm-hmm. He's surrounding himself with more positive people. And I just got chills reading it. And, that's what makes it worth it for me. And that's what should make it worth it for every person listening out there who hasn't done it yet. Because you will affect people that you don't even know. And I hear a lot when I'm posting stuff on social media or I do a live or I do stuff like this, where they tell me, like I won't hear from this person. They won't comment on my stuff. They won't do any of that, which I wish they would.
We all do.
It's crickets, but then you get a message from them like, hey, I've been following you for 6 months or for a year. Like, I'm so inspired by what you're doing. And like, it's those messages that, that tell me it's all worth it. And plus I kind of like being the center of attention.
I do love your honesty, and you touched on this at the beginning of our conversation, your vulnerability. Why have you embraced vulnerability so wholeheartedly? You said at the beginning, well, that's what I do. But why? So many people are afraid of the judgment that comes with vulnerability, but you don't seem to have a problem with it. So what's your messaging and the takeaways for us? What's the learnings there for us and why you've done it?
Look, there's going to be people in life who love you and people in life who hate you. So now that we know that that is a fact, who cares? I want to be surrounded by the people that love me. And the people that hate me, I don't have time in my life for them. Mm-hmm. And neither should anybody else. And that's why you don't care if they criticize you. You don't care I'm not going to say you don't care. Okay, look, things affect you. I mean, we're all human, but you take it with a grain of salt. Okay. There's haters everywhere. That's just what they live for. I'm trying to not set an example. I'm trying to step into the power of being authentic and of being relatable to all the entrepreneurs out there and to all the leaders out there who are doing great work but feel alone, feel isolated, or leaning on compulsive behaviors because they're so stressed out with the day that they just want to escape it all. Because that's how I live my life. And when you go through life, the majority of your life, which I did, hiding with a mask on your face, when you take it off, you don't ever want to put it back on.
That's so powerful that you said that. The way you frame that, though, is that applicable to female entrepreneurs as well? Are you speaking from a male side of your brain or in all of your brain? Put it into perspective for the females that are listening, because my audience is predominantly female.
I am a human. We are all human. We all have feelings. Okay. Men just tend not to show it as much, maybe, or they're like, I was born into this world where my dad, if I fell down and broke something or hurt myself, it's just get up and stop being a wuss. Right. But that's not the reality of the world. Right. That's how I was brought up. That's how a lot of men are brought up. The reality is when I walk into a room, I have the same fear, like a room of people that I don't know. I have some of those same fears walking up to somebody and speaking to somebody who's much more successful than I am, that a woman would have, right? I have the same trepidation, when I get on a call let's say with a CEO of a $1 billion company, a multi-million-dollar company, like, I'm like, man, why am I shaking? I'm shaking. Oh my God. You know, I might handle it differently. We might all handle it differently. That doesn't mean we don't go through the same things. I have a lot of, because I'm in a lot of entrepreneur organizations, there are a lot of female entrepreneurs that I'm surrounded by. So we relate on a variety of levels. Because I'm authentic about it, I'll talk about it. I'll talk about my fears. I'll talk about my challenges. So I actually have way more female friends than I do male friends. You know, and I also know a lot of females who have addictive and compulsive behaviors, a lot who go and drink, right? I find more female entrepreneurs that I know who lean on behaviors as it's a drinking behavior versus a drug behavior.
Right.
That's just in my circle. And, you know, they're going out with clients and they feel like they have to drink. They're expected to drink. But listen, you will get the same respect, if not more, from a client by saying, actually, I don't drink. Or, you know, I'm taking the month off or whatever it is. And you will have just as good a time by not drinking as you will drinking. And that's what I realized when I stopped drinking. I'm like, wait a second, I'm having just as enjoyable a time. And when I wake up in the morning, I feel so much better. And I skip that workout, and I'm not lethargic at work, and my mind isn't dozing all over the place. So, you know, I think these same things exist in both males and females. And, you know, one thing, I know you and I we chatted about this briefly, I don't know, a week or two ago. One of the things that's challenging is that, you know, men and women think that we're so different. And we're different. There's no doubt about it, but we're so similar also. And it's those similarities that we don't want to talk about because they're vulnerable to both men and women that we need to do more of. So our communication is more in line and we can relate to each other more.
Okay, you open the door.
And we can support each other more.
So how are we similar? Tell me. Tell me how we are that much similar and how we can support each other.
It's the same fears that we all face. I mean, we all face the same fears. You're telling me that if you are a public speaker and I am a public speaker, that you don't get nervous when you step on stage in front of 100, 200, 500 people? You get nervous?
Well, I am a little different circumstances. I did that. It's my job. It's my career.
Right.
So for me, it's different. But that's not a fair example. Pick a different example.
Okay, so in a, you know, on a first date.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm married. So
no, not you. I mean, I'm just saying in general, right? I mean, things are going through both people's minds. Okay. If you're walking.
Yes.
All right. Let's say you're walking into a boardroom, okay, and you're surrounded by mostly men.
You got me.
Okay. That's a more applicable example.
Sure.
Now you feel maybe there's a gender bias or something, or you're going to be spoken over. You're not going to be listened to, right? You're not going to be heard.
Yes.
Look, me as an addict, okay, I feel the same way. I'm not female, I'm male, but because I have a past in addiction, there are a lot of people who won't listen to me and give me, and men, I'm talking about men sitting in the room, and give me the same respect that they will somebody else who doesn't have that background, who hasn't been arrested like I have, you know, who hasn't gone through these things that I have, and they judge. And you, just like you're being judged in that room, or you're not being given the proper, you know, stage, not, you know, to speak. Right? I feel the same way coming from my background. It has nothing to do with gender. So there's certain things that we all kind of share. And like when I was going door to door selling home improvements, it was only white person in, you know, a predominantly African-American neighborhoods across the board. You know, I can relate to being that minority in the room, so to speak. I can relate to you sitting in a room and being not given the proper respect. And And, I had a recruiting company, so I know how important it is. And I did, software engineering. I talk to men all the time. They want actually more diversity. Whenever I had a female candidate, they would be super excited because there were not a lot of females in tech, as we know.
It makes me happy to hear that. Michael, I want to know what you want our listeners to take away from your journey. What are the big takeaways? What have you learned?
Well, first off, anybody with an addictive, compulsive behavior that, they're trying to get a handle on, I want to allow, just for your audience, a free consultation call with anybody. And you can give my email, they can contact me directly. So I work with females, I work with males. Addiction is addiction.
Thank you.
Compulsive behavior is compulsive behavior. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that any one of us can change. That change is actually easy. And do one small thing in your life tomorrow. Take a half an hour of some activity that you haven't been doing, of a positive activity, and implant it in your day. And then do it consistently for a week or two. And then take another small activity and do the same thing. And all of a sudden, you started building momentum. And change doesn't become this huge, overwhelming thing. And, I just did that as an example. I wanted to get back to reading books because I've stopped reading books. Even though I wrote a book, I stopped reading. I just listen to audiobooks all the time. And, so every day I'm reading 20 pages of a self-improvement or a motivational book every day without fail, and burning through books now. And it makes me feel better and more productive. And you can do that with anything in your life. So that's my message, that change is actually easy. It takes one small step can lead to one huge change.
Yes, agreed, 1,000,000%. Finally, I need to ask you, how do you chase the high today?
I chase the high by helping people transform their lives, by letting them know, if I can do it, you can do it. Anybody can do it. The support is out there. You just need to have the right mindset. And, that's really, when I see that transformation, that's really what chasing the high is all about for me. And it's all about giving back and making impact. And I do it that way, as well as a lot of other philanthropic ways. But that is really what chasing the high means.
Beautiful.
Me.
All right.
Build those habits, and you can see monumental changes as well.
Where can people find you? The name of your book? Give it to us. On Instagram, you are?
On Instagram, I'm MDASH1. This is my book, Chasing the High. You can find it at chasingthehighbook.com. It was Amazon #1 bestseller.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then you can find me on Facebook at michael.-1. And my website is www.michaelg-.com. I would love to hear from your audience, help out in any way that I can.
Michael, finish the sentence for me. Happiness is?
Happiness is being on a podcast with Carrie.
You're awesome. I have loved this conversation with you. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and for holding space for us in the inner circle. Rich, rich, rich with learnings. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you today. And could you just please send us some sunshine and some warmth up here?
From my face to yours, all the sunshine in the world.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Carrie.